Hello everyone and welcome back to Noia Dev, the series that aims to prove that one developer can create a successful MMO RPG. My name is Dane, and this week on Noia Dev, I procrastinated till the very last second to make this devlog. While I have gotten a lot done on the game in these last 2 weeks, a lot of it is kind of hard to demonstrate. You guys went absolutely ham on the bug reports, and I've been knocking them out as fast as I can. Problem is, I wasn't recording when I fixed them, and I have nothing to show here. But for most of the bugs, there was one underlying issue that was causing pretty much all of them. So I'm gonna try to go over what happened. Noia uses a server-client networking library called Mirror, and that name, Mirror, is kind of an on-the-nose name for how it works. The code for the server and the code for the client are actually the exact same. The only difference is which side is calling the shots. When the server says to spawn a monster here, it isn't sending the clients a bunch of information on the monster stats and whatnot. Since the client has all that information already, the client just needs to know the ID of the monster and where to spawn it. This cuts down on network traffic a whole lot, and this is the exact same way that dungeons work with their environmental settings. When a player enters a dungeon, the lighting, time of day, fog shaders, and all that need to change, and all of these settings are tied to the dungeon object. When the game first starts, all of the dungeons register their environment settings into a giant list. That list is the exact same on both the server and the client, so all the server has to do is tell the client what dungeon settings to grab from the list. And here is where the problem was. Players were going into dungeons and none of the environment changes would take place. The player's house was this weird half 2D, half 3D state. The beehive would be dark if you entered at nighttime. The cutscenes and the path to the throne room were all blurry, and all of this was caused by the dungeon environment parameters not getting set in that global list on the client. But why? This thing right here, a network identity. Attaching one of these network identities to a game object means that the server controls it, or more importantly, controls when it is active versus disabled. It's meant to be used on monsters and players so they're not constantly loaded on the client when players are too far away from them. If you're across the map, you don't need all of the monsters on the opposite side of the map to be loaded in memory. So when you move away from them, the server goes, this player doesn't need to see those monsters anymore, and removes them. But I had accidentally added a network identity to the dungeons a long time ago because past Dane thought they were necessary. So, when the client started, none of the dungeons were active because there was no player near them, and thus none of them ever registered themselves in that dungeon list. A player would enter a dungeon, and the server would say, "Hey, client, load the environmental data for this dungeon, the beehive." And the client would shrug and do nothing. Removing the network identity from the dungeons allowed them to be active when the client first starts, and thus register themselves in the dungeon list, and then everything just worked. Simple solution for a complicated problem. Okay, I think I've talked enough about what was done these last 2 weeks. Let's talk about what's going to happen going forward. I have been working on a new map, the Underground map. Super exciting name, I know. If you've got a better one, let me know down in the comments. This map is heavily inspired by the Aberration map from Ark Survival Evolved, specifically the blue zone of the Aberration map. In Ark, the player has to go underground in this map for lore reasons. The surface is completely uninhabitable during the daytime, so they all go underground, and there's 3 tiers. Green is pretty much safe and it's very foresty. Blue is bioluminescent mushrooms and glowing creatures and whatnot. And red is dangerous radiation and dragons? Anyway, I plan for this map to be full of bioluminescent creatures and plants, very reminiscent to the blue area of Aberration, and ultimately the players will travel through this map in this winding pattern going from top to bottom, then back up to top, and it will ultimately lead them to the desert map. Although there will be this bridge quest line that will span the gap here to create this kind of shortcut, so you won't have to traverse through the entire map if you just want to go quickly from Tinsdale over to the desert. Key word here is quest line. You ever hear the old song, "There's a hole in the bucket"? It's gonna take a while to fix that bridge. So as you can see, this map is multi-tiered, much like the Haunted Mine dungeon, and I do want to utilize a lot of the tricks that I learned while creating the Haunted Mine dungeon, like fog and different perspectives and being able to see down into the map. Although right now the underground map is facing towards the camera rather than away from it like the Haunted Mine dungeon does. Does that make sense? Maybe I'll make two versions of this map to see which one you guys like more, you know, facing towards or facing away. So keep an eye out for that in a future devlog.